As armed conflict swept across Croatia in the fall of 1991, a group of Muslim moderates led by Adil Zulfikar Pasic undertook an effort to prevent similar or worse bloodshed in Bosnia by entering into negotiations with Bosnian Serbs and Serbian President Milosevic.
A rather liberal-minded an assimilationist Muslim, Zulfikar Pasic, could see that the essential was to prevent them start killing each other. And he met Serbs who had precisely the same view, this could be a disaster. And they moved quite far towards agreeing on a way of sharing power so that they wouldn't collide.
Izetbegovic joined the negotiations, and an agreement was ready for signing that specifically guaranteed that Bosnia would remain a unitary republic which would be given equal status to Serbia within a revamped Yugoslavia. Izetbegovic seemed to indicate his acceptance, but then abruptly broke off negotiations aimed at preventing a war.
Izetbegovic did what Zulfikar Pasic calls a stab in the back, because he went on television without telling Zulfikar Pasic he was going to do this, and accused Zulfikar Pasic and the Serbs who negotiated this deal as selling out and traitors to Bosnia. And this, you know, was a terribly dangerous thing to do in '91 and should have put everybody on warning against the kind of peace-loving, multi-ethnic, etc., that he and his followers are always giving towards Western journalists and Western politicians.
In his book, The Politics of Diplomacy, then Secretary of State James Baker wrote that Ambassador Zimmerman strongly advised him to recognize Bosnia. Recognition of Bosnia, however, violated the most basic diplomatic norms. For a government to be recognized, it must be in full control of its territory, it must have clearly established borders, it must also have a stable population. Not a single one of these essential conditions existed in Bosnia in February of 1992, when Zimmerman made his recommendation. U.S. intelligence analysts predicted that recognition would lead to war. Even the Germans thought that recognition of Bosnia would be a serious mistake.
Nein, es hat eine Meinungsverschiedenheit gegeben.
We did have some different opinions in early 1992, as the Americans supported the recognition of Bosnia, whereas we, the Europeans, believed that we should first establish a framework for the whole region.
So basically the policymakers ignored the analysts, and by late January, early February, U.S. policy had come around to the view that we would recognize Bosnia, and we wanted the Europeans to recognize Bosnia along with us. So from mid-February on, we were pushing the Europeans hard to recognize Bosnia, and we were thinking about how we would do that and have the U.S. recognize Croatia and Slovenia at the same time.
With American support, recognition of a separate Bosnian state was now inevitable. Lord Carrington tried to avert disaster by appointing Portuguese President José Cutileiro to find common ground among the Serbs, Muslims, and Croats before an independent Bosnia was recognized.
I asked him to go to Sarajevo and to Lisbon and to have talks about with the three parties in Bosnia to see whether or not some agreement could be reached with a unitary state. I mean, an independent Bosnian state, but in some sort of federal idea in which you've got the three communities to agree.
The Bosnian Serbs, Croats, and Muslims all signed the pact known as the Lisbon Agreement on March 18, 1992. This set up a central government of Bosnia-Herzegovina and 3 ethnic cantons on the model of Switzerland.
It was the last chance, I think, of trying to preserve Bosnia before the war broke out in earnest.
If the Lisbon Plan had been adopted, British author and BBC journalist Misha Glenny wrote later, the war in Bosnia probably would not have happened. But 2 days after signing it, following a meeting with American Ambassador Warren Zimmerman, Izetbegovic changed his mind and disavowed his signature.
Izetbegovic turned around and reneged, as he's reneged on other things.
Zimmerman later acknowledged to David Binder of the New York Times that Izetbegovic had reluctantly signed the agreement to gain European recognition. More than a year after the bloodshed began in Bosnia, Zimmerman also admitted that the Lisbon Plan was not bad at all, but recalls telling Izetbegovic, if you don't like it, why sign it?
Zimmerman told Izetbegovic, look, why don't you wait and see what the U.S. can do for you, meaning we'll recognize you and then help you out. So don't go ahead with the Lisbon Agreement, don't accept the Cutileiro plan, and just hold out for some kind of unitary Bosnian state. So this is a major turning point in our diplomatic efforts.
The American administration made it quite clear that they thought that the proposals, the Cutileiro and my proposals, were unacceptable.
With no agreement amongst the Muslims, Serbs, and Croats, and with all sides mobilized for war, the European community voted, as the U.S. insisted, to recognize Bosnia on April 6th, along with Slovenia and Croatia. This act, Roger Cohen of the New York Times later wrote, was as close to criminal negligence as a diplomatic act can be. Indeed, international recognition and the outbreak of the Bosnian War were simultaneous. The world put light to the